Hey, we are going to, over the next few weeks, just kind of hit some standalones. But as I was praying through the different topics that I wanted us to explore together, I realized I needed to pull back a theme of a series that we used, probably it was about 4 years ago, called Disruption. So each week is going to talk a little bit about the disruptiveness of Christ in our lives. So we haven't done a participation moment in a while, so let's do one today. I want you to, I'm going to come down in just a minute and walk around, and then you tell me your answer. What is something that disrupted your life but was a good thing? You with me? We understand that there are things that happen to us in this life that are disruptive, that are harmful or bad or negative, right? But there are also things in this life that are disruptive, right? They force us to change, and they're good things, right? And they're good things. So we'll start over here. What's something that's been disruptive? Yes, come on, your husband. Yes. 29 years later, still a disruptor. So, anyway. Yeah, having kids, having children for sure. Yeah, military, moving you here. Yeah, and how many times, not just moved here, but how many moves did you do? Didn't do too many. 5, well, that's a lot for most people, but not necessarily a lot for military, right? But, right, that's disruptive. Something disruptive that was good. Yeah, moving closer to grandchildren and children. Come on. Yes, you can second that. Moving close. Let's start in the back and work our way. Something disruptive but good, Jennifer.
In 2021, when the market went crazy and all the houses, I had to leave my rental that I loved and I didn't want to move out of.
Yep.
But I got forced to buy a really beautiful house.
Come on. Yep. So sometimes your life circumstances you would not have otherwise chosen end up becoming a good thing. If you couldn't hear, she had to move out of a rental because the owner was selling it, but then she ended up buying the house which she loves, right? In a community that loves you, for sure. So, yeah, you can clap for that. Come on. Yeah. Somebody else in the middle, something disruptive that...
So almost similar, but during the stock market, I had to
Change careers, yeah. During the stock market upheaval, change careers. It's good. Well, I'm not over there. I'm coming. Marla? Something disruptive that was good. Moving a lot. Yes, that's a theme. Brentley?
I started homeschooling at third grade. That was disruptive, but it was a good thing.
It was a good thing. It was good for you and good for the school that you would have gone to. Yes. Anybody here? Saturday night, yeah, doing church on Saturday, right? That's a huge change for people. Come on. Anybody else? Anybody? All right. No, you understand that there are things in this life that maybe you chose them, maybe you didn't choose, and the disruption that it caused was worth it because of the gain, right? But it doesn't mean that it wasn't without stress. It doesn't mean that it wasn't without hardship. It doesn't mean that you didn't have questions that came along with it. Can I just share with you that I think we are all ill-prepared for how disruptive Jesus is in our lives. Right? We talk about him being our Savior, and he is. We talk about him being our restorer and our healer, our waymaker, our victor. He's all of those things, and we should not stop talking about him in those ways and in those terms. But have you ever thought about how Jesus is your disruptor? That he shows up in our lives and he just begins to bring about change. Sometimes it's change that we choose and we didn't realize how hard it was going to be. But can we also agree that there's times where he starts changing stuff and we're like, whoa, I'm not sure I gave you permission to do that. And he's like, I'm not sure I'm asking for your permission, right? And he just starts bringing about change. If you've ever done home renovation, you know that it always usually begins with demolition. And I think that's true for our lives as devoted follower of Christ. He wants us to experience the abundant life that he promises, and oftentimes it requires him to tear down some things so that he can build up new things. I'm not going to read these tonight, but if you're a note taker, it's in Mark 10, 17 to 27. I think this is a great example of how Jesus is often disruptive in our lives. This is the famous story, right, of the rich young ruler who came and asked Jesus, what must I do to have eternal life? And so Jesus begins to have this conversation with him based on the 10 Commandments. And he's like, I've done all of those things. And Jesus is like, no, there's one more thing that you need to do. I need you to go sell all of your possessions and give that money to the poor. And then he walks away. He doesn't follow Jesus, right? Because he was a person of great wealth. And Jesus knew that when this conversation started, because he knows our hearts. He knows the story of our lives. And I think this is part of Jesus trying to help this young man understand that his possessions were an idol, right? What Jamal was talking about in that worship exhortation, that his possessions had become his God. But I think he's also having this conversation with this rich young ruler because he knew one day the Bible was going to be written and Scripture was going to teach us. And this is also Jesus giving some commentary on how he was changing belief systems. Because for Jewish thought in Jesus' day, and it had been for hundreds of years, is that your righteousness was acquired through your own effort and through your work. So the very question that this rich young ruler asked, right, was speaking out of how he had been raised to believe about life, is what must I do to have eternal life? And I think what Jesus is trying to remind us in this story is that there's nothing that we can do to have eternal life. It's about Jesus doing something on our behalf. And this is an example of why Jesus was rejected in his day, because he was a disruptor of commonly held religious beliefs. Jesus was changing the way people believed about God and about righteousness and about eternity. In John chapter 2, again in 13 and 16, again, I'm not going to read there, but if you're a note taker, you know Jesus bookended his ministry by turning tables over in the temple courts. Now, why did he do that? Well, because if you were going to make an offering at the temple, they would only accept a certain kind of money, And so people came from all over the world, and so they had to exchange their money for the money that was accepted by the temple. And of course, all those money changers, they took advantage. It's like when you buy food at Busch Gardens, right? They know they got you. It costs you, right, a few $100s to get in the park and then a few $1,000s to eat while you're there, right? And the same was true in the temple courts. They know we've got them. And so they would charge these exorbitant exchange rates. They were becoming wealthy off of the desire of other people to worship. And Jesus said, hey, this is not supposed to be a place of profiteering. It's supposed to be a place of prayer. Can you just stop and ask yourself for a minute, why had no one else turned those tables over? Why weren't there people protesting about how wrong this was? Right? Because sometimes social norms, even when they're upside down, become so familiar to us, we don't even realize they're wrong anymore. Right? This is Jesus being a disruptor. Even 2,000 years ago, he's saying not just to the money changers, hey, this isn't right. I think he was trying to awaken something inside of people. Hey, this is not right. Wake up. You're being misled and taken advantage of. He's a disruptor. Oh, I like this one. I'm going to read this one. This is in Luke 12, 13 to 21. It says, then someone called from the crowd, teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me. And Jesus replied, friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that? Then he said, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. And then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. And he said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns, I'll build bigger ones, and then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night, and then who will get everything that you work for? Yes, a person is a fool, listen to what it says, who stores up earthly wealth, but does not have a rich relationship with God. It's such a powerful story, isn't it? Right? Which Jesus here, he's challenging values system. The value system that all of us have. All of us have a value system. All of us make decisions based on things we value, things that we value more than others. And so Jesus is stepping into, right, the societal thought of valuing material possession at the expense of intimacy with your Creator. And Jesus is saying, don't make this same mistake, right? This is another example of why Jesus was not celebrated by everyone, because he had a disruptive presence with commonly held beliefs, with social norms, and with values. And I think those three examples are great reasons why many of us do not practice what we're going to be spending our time talking about today as a weekly Sabbath. See, I think one of the reasons why people don't practice a weekly Sabbath is because it involves Jesus disrupting long-standing beliefs. Right? If you've grown up in the church, maybe you've been taught that the Sabbath was part of the Mosaic law, and that because of the rest you now have in your relationship with Christ, you no longer need the Sabbath that was established then, right? And so there's this belief that in post-Jesus that Sabbath is irrelevant. I don't agree with that. I'm going to talk about it tonight. I think one of the reasons why people don't practice Sabbath is because of commonly accepted social norms. I think we live in a Western American culture, and we're so surrounded by this idea of always wanting more and having more that we've come to accept the sacrifice that requires of us, which means that we become less. We have more, but we become less as a person. Our relationships suffer. Our families suffer. Commonly accepted social norms. And I think it also because it challenges our values system. We, as a society, do not value slowing down. What if we had done a survey before service and said, give me your top 3 values in life? How many of you, one of those 3 would have been slowing down in life and finding peace? I'm not sure any of us would have listed that up there in our top 3, but yet I think it's up there as one of God's greatest priorities. Somebody say all the rest. Now, we're not going to talk about each of these tonight. We've done this as a series before as a church. I remember it was probably back in the early 2000s. Vanessa and I, we lived in the inner city of Richmond. You might not know that about our story. We lived in a community called Barton Heights, right next to one of the housing projects there. We were there for about 10 years, and we had corporate jobs, but then on the weekends, we had a private foundation that did the public church service and hot breakfast for the homeless in Monroe Park on the campus of VCU. And so we had brought different churches together of different denominational backgrounds. Like, little did we know that was going to be part of our lifelong story. And we would, on Sunday mornings, you're up at like 4 a.m., and we did scrambled eggs and sausage and seasoned potatoes. We told people it was the best breakfast in town. Coffee and lemonade, a bag lunch to go. In the summertime, we fed over 200 people. We fed first, and then we did the church service second, because we weren't using the food to bait them to hear the gospel, right? And so people got to decide, right? This was part of respecting their dignity, of giving them agency. You choose whether or not you want to stay for the service. You know, did we give bigger scoops to people that stayed? Maybe. No, I'm just kidding. And so we did this public church service, and then we had passenger vans, and then other churches showed up to give people rides to church, and then we had people that went to church with us. We had kids from our neighborhood that went to church with us, and all of our children were born in a hospital. Well, then came back to that house, and people always said, I don't know how you feel safe there. And I said, well, we're actually safer in my neighborhood than your neighborhood, because everybody in my neighborhood actually comes to your neighborhood to break into houses. Nobody robs anybody in my neighborhood because we don't have anything. We don't have anything. So if you're missing things, let me know, because the guy's probably selling them on the corner in front of I can get your stuff back at a reduced rate, but I can get it back for you, right? This was part of our journey and part of our story. But right, we were in some ways burning the candle at both ends, if I could use that cliche, right? We're running this ministry. We're doing inner city urban revitalization. We're a part of our church, and then we have corporate jobs, and now we're starting to have children and build a family. And we knew that if we're not careful, we're going to wear ourselves out, right? And so we started to really dig into this idea of rest. And I remember one day doing a study, and I was not on staff then at a church, but because we did an open air service, we preached all the time in the park, public preaching. And so I remember doing this study on Hebrews 4 and coming to this realization that, hey, there's more than one kind of rest in this life. In Hebrews 4, this is my viewpoint. You might not agree, but the Hebrews 4 talks about there's a restfulness that you have because of your relationship with God, right? And in fact, there's a feeling of unrest, right? We're going to talk about that later in the service. We talk about it with communion. In fact, I would say there's a feeling of unrest that you have in life until you find yourself reconciled to God. Right? Because every person's deepest need is to know God and to be known by Him. And so until you discover that, right, there's this sense of unrest. But when you come into a relationship with God, there's a restfulness that you begin to experience. There's a restfulness that comes through purpose. When you begin to give your life to something that you feel like God has called you to do, shout out to the incredible message last week, A Transcendent Toil. Come on, Pastor Derek. So good. And how about the week before that on beauty, and then the week before that on embers, right, with the Reverend, soon-to-be Reverend Dr. Amy Kimball. So those were 3 great weeks. If you weren't here, you need to go back and listen to those. But there's a restfulness that you find on the inside, right? Even though your work might make you physically tired, there's a restfulness of your soul that you experience when you're on purpose in life. There's a perpetual rest. This is what I say. When you have it settled in your heart, what's waiting for you after you die, there's a peace that you find. There's a restfulness that you carry with you in life. It's what the Apostle Paul said, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. Why? Because it was settled for him. He knew what was coming. There's a restfulness that you have. And then finally, there is a physical rest. Can I just say to you that you and I were created by God. We're designed to have all 4 of these, right? It's not multiple choice. It's not as though we're just supposed to pick one. And I would say the people that you meet in life that have the greatest sense of peace, the greatest sense of restfulness that they carry, even when they're busy, even when they're active, even when they're accomplishing great things in this life, there's a restfulness deep inside of them. It's because they're connected to all 4 of these things. But I want to talk tonight specifically about the last one. This is Isaiah 58, 13 to 14, and it reads this way: keep the Sabbath day holy. Don't pursue your own interests on that day, but enjoy the Sabbath and speak of it with delight as the Lord's holy day. Honor the Sabbath and everything you do on that day. And don't follow your own desires or talk idly, right? That's him saying, right? The prophet saying, don't, right? It's not a day for your own selfish desires. Then the Lord will be your delight. It says, I will give you great honor and satisfy you with the inheritance I promised to your ancestors. And then it says, I, the Lord, have spoken. What does that mean? It's a fancy poetic way of saying, do what I say. Yeah. It's him saying, hey, I'm the creator of the universe. I'm trying to help you out here. Don't swim upstream. What if you found out that we were expanding our pastoral staff here? And then I said to you, hey, let me tell you a little bit about this pastor. We're so excited that she's coming on staff, or he, right? That they worship other gods and actively participate in other religions. That as a side hustle, they make and sell idols on Etsy that are accompanied by prayer cards to the God of your choice? What if I said they spoke with profanity, especially using God and Jesus as curse words? What if I said they spoke disrespectfully to their parents and they spoke of them publicly in a derogatory way? You might say, I know that, Pastor. Oh. Openly endorse murder out of vengeance and anger as being appropriate. Practiced an open marriage relationship with their spouse. They were frequently dishonest for personal gain, and their belief was that it's just the natural part of life. They gave false testimony whenever possible because their reasoning was that everyone's guilty of something. And then finally, if I said they envied their neighbor's possessions as a way to motivate themselves to get more stuff. You'd be like, I hope you would say, I don't think City Life is really the church for us, right? Now that list of 9 things comes from what? Yes. How many commandments? How many did I read? 9. Yeah. Now what if I said to you, hey, this pastor that we hired 3 months ago, they work so hard. They haven't taken a day off yet. They're such hard workers. Would you have the same reaction to that statement as you would the other 9? We would not. We would not. Come on, let's be honest. We would not. Why is that? Because we have come into this place of societal acceptance that part of American culture and never stopping is just part of this life. And could I just say to you, it should not be. It should not be. See, I believe that God knew the world, especially the church, was going to wrestle with the moral boundary of Sabbath and rest. And so he wanted to make sure that he put it next to 9 other things that we would never come close to saying, oh, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. And yet, even with all of that, here we are. Are we not? Right? It's not by accident that God said, hey, let's put Sabbath in with the big tent. Right? There's all kinds of moral boundaries that exist. But these are, God says, let's highlight 10. And let's make having a weekly moment of rest one of them. It's a reminder that God's value system is so oftentimes different than our own. Is it not? And it is a reminder that sometimes Scripture is trying to, by association, remind us how dangerous it is to compromise any of these boundaries that God has given to us. If you were to come to me and talk about wrestling with any of these other 9, I would have a feeling of we've got to. This is dangerous, and I can just my own confession is that I don't always feel that same sense of danger as a pastor if you're working too much, and I should. Right, the alarm bell should go off. I should be concerned for you. Exodus 20:8 through 11. Oh, love these verses. You're like, I didn't even know those verses were in the Bible. I know. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath day, a day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. And on that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, any foreigners that live among you. For 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and everything in them. But on the 7th day he rested. And that is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and he made it holy. You should take a picture of this next slide that's going to come up. And then at some point tomorrow, I'm going to invite you to read that text yourself. It's Exodus 28 through 11. And then everywhere that it says Sabbath, instead of saying Sabbath, read the definition. You understand what I'm asking you to do? And everywhere that it says holy, which is the word kadosh, instead of saying the word holy, read the definition. Right? It will change the way you read this text if you put the definitions with the words. Why is that? Because you have definitions that you associate with those words that you've just gathered along the way in life. And then sometimes our definitions are incomplete. And then when you put the actual definition in there, it awakens something in you. Every time it says rest, this is one of my favorite Hebrew words, which is nuach. To rest, to be at rest, to settle down, to stay, to dwell, comfortable, convenient, and easygoing. Stop it already. So rich, right? When's the last time you gave yourself a day that was defined by comfortable, convenient, and easygoing? There is a sacredness to the rhythm of rest in this life. Because without rest, you will never become the person that God created you to be. Stress and anxiety, I'm not saying that all stress and anxiety comes from this, right? Just a disclaimer, right? I'm not saying that. Don't put words in my mouth. But there is a stress and then there's an anxiousness that comes from not giving your body what it needs and your soul what it needs and your mind what it needs, right? And I would argue, and John Ortberg, an incredible Christian thinker and theologian of our day, so many books. I think this is the one, the Life You've Always Wanted, if I'm not mistaken. He says he believes that a lack of rest is the greatest enemy of Christian character in this world. And I think he's right. I think he's right. What are you doing to restore a sense of sacredness for rest in the world today? Not just for yourself, but for your children, for your community, for your family, for the generation that you're a part of, the generation that you're mentoring, whether you realize you're mentoring them or not because they're watching you and the rhythms of your life. So let's circle in the home stretch and let me give you 8 practical ways, right? 8 practical ways. This is a quote from Karl Barth, another great theologian of our day and time. Let things take their course with particular freedom, distinct from weekday practice, to as much or as little as the day brings. The day should be free from compulsion. How great is that? Let things take their course with particular freedom, distinct from weekday practice, to as much or as little as the day brings. The day should be free from compulsion. If you're going to try to institute a rhythm of rest in your life, could I just encourage you, you need to start that journey prayerfully. Because you're talking about undoing the normal, natural rhythm of your life as it exists today. And sometimes that's really hard to do. And so we say to people, before you make any big changes, start having a big conversation with God about how you're going to need His help to uproot the rhythms of your life. Before you rush out and try to make all these massive changes, just begin to pray and talk to God about your desire to enter into a rhythm of rest that is reflective of Scripture and honors His expectations of you as your creator and you as His child. You with me? That's where you should start. Next, the slide's going to come up. It's going to have that list of 8 things. There it is. The next is that you've got to be willing to practically invest in rest. Meaning that, especially if you've got kids, being restful does not necessarily mean that you're going to be sedentary, right? It might be that you take day trips. It might mean that you do go to Busch Gardens, so you need to have a few $1,000s, right, set aside. So rest does not mean sedentary. Rest means that you are being rejuvenated. And you can be rejuvenated through activities, even if you're a little bit physically tired at the end of the day. The question is whether or not do you wake up the next day refreshed. Your body, your soul, your mind, you're ready to approach the week that is ahead of you. Right? I think there was a scale, let's call it sedentary on one side and active on the other. I lean way towards sedentary as resting, and Vanessa leans way towards being active, right, as resting. So if you're married, you've got to find, right, a rhythm. If you've got children, right, they're going to have different personalities, and that's going to dictate how they like to rest. So it gets complicated, but you have everything you need to figure it out. Right? And so part of it is setting aside some money in your budget for things that you like to do. For me, that's streaming services. Vanessa, that's for flowers and mulch, right? She likes to garden. You understand what I'm saying? You might need some things. And then maybe motorcycling is on my list as well, which involves a lot of gear, admittedly. Invest. Protect. Number 3, you've got to make a decision. I'm going to protect this day. If you take the step, are bold enough to say, we're going to figure out, right? I'm not even going to say that you have to do it 24 hours. It might be the best thing that you could do to start with your plan for rest is just a half day. Right? You can ease into it. It's okay. If you were to just say, on this given day, right, from the time we get up until, let's say you do it on Sundays, from the time we get up until 2 o'clock, this is going to become a day of rest for us. The very first day that you choose to do that, all hell is going to break loose in your household. I guarantee it, right? The devil does not want you to discover the rhythm of rest, because if you discover the rhythm of rest, you're going to discover a new pace of the character of Christ being formed in you, and you're going to become the world changer that God created you to be. So you just got to be prepared in advance. You've got to protect that day. If you choose to set aside Sunday morning, right, you're going to get an invitation from every child in your kids' right school, right, for this incredible activity that everybody's supposed to be invited to. You understand what I'm saying to you? Now, you might choose to participate in that, but if you've said, we just need a day to ourselves as a family, right, you've got to guard it. Right? You've got to say, hey, I can't do that. If it's family, you can say, can we reschedule? This is a day that we're starting to set aside for rest. Right? You've got to be willing to guard and protect that day. You've got to be flexible. Jesus talks about this, right? If your car breaks down on the side of the road on your Sabbath, I'm not saying to you that you say to your kids, we're just going to sit here because we have to rest. And I'm not changing that tire. And somebody's going to have to come along, right, who's going to change it for me, right? You understand what I'm saying, right? I'm exaggerating here. But there will be times, right? A tree falls on your neighbor's house because there's a storm. Don't say to your neighbor, I wanted to help, but my pastor said that this was a Sabbath day for me, right? No. You're gonna right? You're gonna go out. You're gonna crank up your chainsaw, right? You're gonna help your neighbor, right? I'm not talking about becoming legalistic, right? So you're gonna have to be flexible, but there's a way to be flexible and still protect your Sabbath. If you are married and you have kids, it's a day for family to be together. Dudes, do not wake up tomorrow morning and leave before everybody gets up and go play 36 holes of golf and put a note on the mirror of the bathroom that says, good luck with the kids today. I'm going to rest, like Pastor Fred said. Because if that happens, your wife is going to call me, and then I'm going to actually come find you on the golf course and bring you home in front of all of your children. You understand what I'm saying to you, right? This is right. It's a day of it. Now you might need some alone time. I'm but it comes as a surprise often to people. I'm a naturally introverted person. Vanessa is not a naturally introverted person, right? So there are times where I need time to be alone. I think it's one of the reasons why I have a tendency to stay up late, because I know that I have discovered, even when our kids, right, were at home, I love being around my family, right? But I need time by myself. And so oftentimes I find that late at night, right, after everyone's gone to bed. So you can negotiate rhythms based on your personality. I was, Debbie Monroe and I were joking there. She's on the camera here because she's also a fellow introvert. And we were talking about during greet time, we should have welder's masks that you can just flip down, right? And we have earplugs available in the back. And then next week, we're going to have welding masks available. So if you're really a hardcore introvert, you could just, right, flip the mask down, and that's just as a sign to people, right? I'll shake your hand, but don't ask me any questions, right? Because I'm an introvert, right? And so, no, I get it, right? Your personality is given to you by God. But our personalities can never be used as an excuse to go against the things that God expects us to do, right? And so you've got to find a way, right, to make it work for you and your whole family, even given your personalities. You learn from others. There are some people in this church, like for Vanessa and I, we've been doing this for over 30 years, practicing the rhythm of Sabbath in our lives. It's the only world our children knew. Our children grew up in a world of understanding the rhythm of Sabbath and how to do Sabbath and how to honor Sabbath, how to practice Sabbath. So if this is new for you, then as you begin to build relationships with people, ask questions about how do you deal with this? How do you manage that, right? This is part of what it means to be in a church with each other. You've got to give yourself grace. This is why I put it. If you are the kind of person that's always on the go, then whether you realize it or not, you have become accustomed to a certain amount of adrenaline coursing through your veins throughout the day, right? You have become accustomed to a certain chemical balance in your brain, and you need that adrenaline, right, for you to feel alive, to feel as though you matter. And I'm not saying that's wrong. What I'm saying is that if that's all that you've ever done your whole life, that when you start to do Sabbath, you've got to give yourself some grace, because most people who live this high octane life, when they begin to practice Sabbath, they actually feel symptoms that are akin to depression. You're actually going through withdrawal from all the adrenaline that you used to coursing through. Right? There's a detoxing that you undergo. Right? The first few times you do it, you're going to go, "This is terrible. This is terrible." Right? And so you're literally going through withdrawal. But if you give it some time, this is what you'll discover. That you will discover that you value rest just as much as you value activity, right? And because that does something different to your body that's missing, that you desperately need. And then this is the final one here, is rest. Now, why do you say, Fred, why do you even put that up there? Because that's the measure. That's the measure. The next day, you should just simply ask yourself the question, do I feel rested? Do I feel refreshed? Do I feel rejuvenated? That's the test that you start to take. And if you're a part of a family, that's a question that you begin to talk to each other about. Some of our most restful days as a family when our kids were little were some of our busiest days. But we did things that we loved doing that weren't part of our normal week, that created a feeling in us of rejuvenation. And we built our entire lives, right? I would say this is one of the cornerstones, right, of our lives as a family. And I hope it will become a cornerstone for you. I'm going to invite the worship team to come back up. We're going to get ready to partake of communion. Hey, before we do, I just want to throw this one final verse at you. Again, I'm not going to read it for the sake of time. It's in Genesis 2, 1-3. But there's a phrase in here in verse 3, and it says, "And God blessed the seventh day." Could I just suggest to you that there is a blessing from God that's missing from your life if you're not entering into a Sabbath day? There are blessings that God gives to us that we don't do anything to acquire. It's just his favor. But there are also blessings that come to us because we posture ourselves and position ourselves in a place to receive it. And in Genesis, it says he blessed the seventh day. What does that mean? I think it means a lot of things, but one of the things I really believe that it means that when you enter into this rhythm of rest, you enter into a sense of being blessed by your Father. That there is something that he wants to deposit in your life. There's things that he wants to speak to you, give to you, do for you, that you are only going to find if you're willing to enter in and to meet him in that space. Stand with me as we prepare our hearts for communion. There's a gluten-free option here as we get ready to enter into this communion moment. You can come and grab this. I'm going to close a little bit differently than what I planned. You might be here tonight and you say, Fred, all of this talk about rest and Sabbath is something that I need. But you might say, but I came in here today, and as I look back over the story of my life, I can't find a moment in time where I even made a decision to follow Jesus to start with. Then I would say you can find that moment right now. You can find that moment right now. Maybe rest is a conversation we need to get to, but maybe we need to rewind it a little bit, and we just need to have a conversation about Jesus and what this table represents. 2,000 years ago, Jesus came to this world to find us, to rescue us, to set us free from a life of groping around in the dark, trying to satisfy an emptiness inside that only God could fill. And he wants to fill that in you today. Jesus is closer to you than you realize. And he's extending a hand. So as you look back over the story of your life, if you can't find a moment in time where you made a vow of devotion, you promised your life to him, then I hope as we sing this song, as you come and get these elements, that you're going to do that tonight. We like to call it taking your first spiritual breath. So you come, you grab one of these. Don't partake of it yet, because I'm going to talk about what it represents, and we're going to partake of it together. There's regular in the basket, there's gluten-free, but in the middle, this isn't here for you to have a fun souvenir. This is here if you're saying tonight, tonight's going to be the night where I take a step to devote my life to Christ. Then as you come get your communion element, you pick up one of these crosses, and then we'll talk about what that means too. So as we worship, you sing and you come.